Hello and welcome to the podcast Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures, the podcast where we watch movies and inflict them upon each other. It's been a while since I said that. I only realized it last podcast.
I was like, actually, welcome to the podcast. I'm like, as opposed to the cooking show? Like, what?
You never know, man. People get easily confused in this day and age. My name is Ben, and with me is... Huddy?
Jim.
Jim. Actually, I want to apologize. I just named you after T.J. Miller's character, and that's not cool.
Yeah. Yes. Well.
And this week we watched Cloverfield, a first for me.
I can't believe that. I was surprised when you mentioned it. You're like, we're gonna watch Cloverfield, and I've never seen it, and I'm like, what? What?
Now, look, of all the Cloverfields, I've only seen 10 Cloverfield Lane.
Right. Okay. Well, that's an excellent film.
Brilliant.
So it was just surprising. It's not really surprising that someone hasn't seen Cloverfield, but it's surprising that you haven't seen Cloverfield, given the sort of Venn diagram of, our interests, if you like,
If you asked all of my movie-going friends if Ben had watched Cloverfield, they would all have said yes. Like 100%, like no doubt. It's just one of those movies that either they would have thought I'd seen it with them, or like, yeah, just somehow it slipped through my net.
So what did you think?
Okay. It's a complicated question. Let me go through the stats and then I'll tell you what I think.
All right.
Released 2008, directed by Matt Reeves. In my headcanon, JJ directed it, not produced it. Just a correction on my part. For those of you who don't know, Matt Reeves did like a couple of Planet of the Apes movies, like War of the Planet of the Apes and Dawn of the Planet of the Apes. He also did, I think, the really fantastic The Batman. Really cool movie. Produced by Brian Burke and J.J. Abrams. J.J. Abrams of Star Trek, Star Wars, Lost, and Super 8 fame. Starring Lizzie Kaplan, Jessica Lucas, T.J. Redacted Miller, Michael Stahl David, Michael Vogel, Odette Annabelle, Nee Yerstman. So she's credited in this movie as Odette Yerstman, but everything kind of from this, she's Odette Annabelle. Fun fact about Odette Annabelle. Do you know what her first role was?
No.
She was one of the kids in the classroom in Kindergarten Cop. That's just like one of those cool little things you find, right? But budget between, and this blows my mind, 25 to 30 million. And box office returns of about 172.4 million domestically. I don't have the international numbers here separate. Did I like this movie? Yes. But I think I liked this movie more as a museum piece than I did as a movie.
Yeah.
So quickly, the plot. Some friends are having a going away party in New York, and one of those guys' names is Rob, and Rob gets a lot of people killed. And basically, he's gone to Japan, and he's having a go away party. There's some past history between him and another person called Beth. Which is explained, I think, very cleverly by this whole thing is being recorded on a camcorder, but they're recording over a tape. And the thing on that tape is their day at the Coney Island Wharf. So every time like they stop the camera, it just plays the in-between bits, and it's kind of a cool way to get the backstory. But yeah, so he has a backstory with Beth. They're having a going away party. They love each other, but they won't say it because he ghosted her. Then basically a kaiju attack happens in New York. And it takes us a while to kind of learn that's what it is. And through some decision-making that I will say is very poor, they decide to try and go save Beth. And that actually leads to one of my favorite set pieces of the whole thing. And they save Beth, but along the way, look, I'm just going to throw it out there. I feel so sorry for Lizzie Kaplan's character in this movie. She gets the short end of so many sticks. She's not driving her own story. She just gets pulled from situation to situation. And B, all the worst things happen to her. Anyway, they rescue Beth, and then they're kind of trying to get out of the city. The army's like, you have to get to this helicopter by 6 a.m. and we're going to fly you out of the city. Through some shenanigans, the helicopter crashes. T.J. Miller gets stamped on, eaten. And it's just Beth and Rob, as I said, the villain of this story, who are left. And depending on the version of the film you watch, they die or they possibly live. And that is Cloverfield.
Nicely done. So it's interesting because there's there's a lot of things about Cloverfield. I hadn't watched Cloverfield for quite some time, but I definitely seen it a few times, back in the day. I think I maybe didn't, I always liked it. I should say that. I always really enjoyed the movie, but I'm not sure if I always perhaps gave it credit for just how clever it is, it's a movie that is really kind of bafflingly clever. And I suppose it probably has been, you know, maybe 10 years since I watched it. And I know an awful lot more about how movies are made now than I did even 10 years ago. And I'm just sort of applying that knowledge now, going, oh, clever, oh, clever, oh, clever, like,
This
time and time and
movie,
time again.
based on a pretty dumb subject matter, is crazy smart as far as its production, its development, it's the way it was made. Like, what they did is very difficult. Like, very difficult. Like, it's almost like, so when I was watching it, I was like, man, this really feels like one of those attractions in a theme park that you walk through and you get guided by actors. Because like it's like things happening off to the side of you and you turn to look at it, but you keep moving and stuff like that. But it's a movie with hundreds and hundreds of extras, with digital effects, probably in places I didn't even see a whole bunch of, obviously. And mostly likable characters that you kind of do get to know through their kind of reactions to things. What they did was, as I said, the reason I think I liked it is I look back on that and go, that was really hard and they executed it. That's impressive. Is it entertaining by today's movie standards? Yes, but probably not the same way it hit back when it was released.
Yeah, it's tricky because it's look, ultimately, from a sort of technical perspective and from a narrative conceit perspective, this is a found footage movie, which at its sort of worst, can be seen as a gimmick, and that idea that, okay, it's as if someone was recording something and they left the camera running and they captured this stuff that perfectly makes up a 3-act structure of, this monster attack, and also develops all of the characters around them in well executed arcs. It's tricky because obviously that's impossible, right? It's the conceit of the film, is really, when you think about it for just a second, it's like it must be constructed. Like, now obviously this one's about a monster attack, right? So this one's definitely constructed. But, the whole idea is that it sort of lends it this extra level of realism. Now, that said, in terms of a genre, if you like, of found footage movie making, you can't really do it better than this. Like, this is probably the pinnacle of that type of storytelling. So it's really
not the most
pushed it.
successful. We can get into that if you want, but I agree with you. As far as execution, I do believe it's the best. They've so many moving. So found footage, by its nature, has as little moving parts as possible, because every element you add to it makes it 1,000 times more difficult to actually get across to your audience. So usually it's like person lost in the woods, a person in a house, like haunting, a lot of like low budget horror, right? Where this, you've got big budget action, explosions, all the stuff. Like if they'd released this movie and it wasn't found footage, you'd be like, okay, that makes way more sense. But they released it found footage and they executed it in a way. Also, little tip, I had a lot to fit in this week, so I had to watch this movie over a few sessions. One of those was on the bus on the way to work. I almost threw up. Because I'm usually pretty good with found footage, like it doesn't make me sick, but add that to riding in a vehicle and it was devastating.
It is interesting, actually, because, I remember when this came out, there was a lot of talk about the motion of it. And I remembered that, particularly once the film started. And I'm like, that's right, it's found footage and we're going to be shaken. And I completely underestimated just how bad it was. I was watching it at home in a traditional sort of environment on a couch looking at a big TV. So I was not on a moving bus. But even then, there were moments where I was definitely like, oh, it's a it's a bit much. Like, like, so it was actually a little bit surprising to me because, usually when they say something, when there's those warnings like, hey, this film's got lots of strobing, or this film's, got big contrast issues or shakiness, I'm usually fine. But in this one, I'm like, no, there was definitely merit to that warning.
You hear it a lot when these movies come out, like, oh, they walked out because people were sick. A lot of people did have that problem with this film. If it's something that you suffer from, you're going to get triggered in this movie without a shadow of a doubt. The motion sickness, the blur, the explosions, the light, the strobing, and then add in the soundtrack and noise, right? The soundtrack and the audio tracks in this film are next level in the way they're done. Like the creature noises, even just like when they're in the tunnel and the thing's walking above them on the ground, and you feel it through the sound like you would if you were there. I had headphones on for that bit because I was traveling, and it was like it kept me really in the movie. This movie could have been made with poor sound very easily because the camcorder doesn't have great sound. They could justify that very easily, and they could have artistically chosen to do that. But I'm really glad they kind of decided to give us movie sound.
Yeah, it's something where I really like Cloverfield. So Cloverfield was J.J. Abrams, saying, "Hey, let's do a big monster movie in a different way." And one thing that I think is super interesting about Cloverfield is Abrams was never as well. And look, this is maybe debatable now. He's a massive name in Hollywood, but like. Abrams had a lot of heat, if you like, as they sort of say, at this exact time. He was basically coming off of Lost. He was transitioning into the world of features. He'd already directed Mission Impossible 3. He was prepping Star Trek. Like, he was a director who was really hot. Now, as we've said, he didn't actually direct this movie, but his fingerprints are all over it in terms of the way it was done, the way it was released, the way it was marketed. Marketing on this one is like a textbook in mystery box viral marketing for a movie. Now, this was really JJ's party trick in the sort of the 2000s, basically coming off of Lost, was marketing things and setting up these mystery box type campaigns, was basically what he was really, really well known for. And Cloverfield is a resounding success for that kind of thing, particularly with its found footage, sort of conceit of the movie. Like, so that was a really cool thing. On Cloverfield, like, I don't know if you remember at the time, Ben, but I distinctly recall we didn't know what it was, and no one knew what it was. And it was this thing, it was teased. It was like there was a project, it didn't have a name. J.J. Abrams was working on it, maybe something to do with monsters, but even that we didn't really know. They dropped sort of a mystery trailer in front of, I don't know, I think it was Transformers or something.
Yeah, Transformers.
And it didn't even say what the title of the film was, and it was obviously all over the internet. It was just like a really well done, drip fed kind of marketing release, which generated hype beautifully for the movie and really suited the idea of a found footage kind of film, at the same time.
It wasn't the first case of it, but it was definitely a well executed viral marketing strategy. Can you do me a favor, though? You used a term in explaining J.J. Abrams that I think is worth exploring, because I think it's an interesting concept, and it's definitely something that he does. Mystery box. Can you explain that to our audience?
Yeah, so the idea of a mystery box is really something that basically relates to marketing when we talk about film and television. And it's this idea that you are doing a very, very tightly structured marketing campaign with viral elements that strings an audience along and doesn't reveal everything at the start. And you will do little like red herrings, if you like, in terms of clues maybe for the audience. There might be websites where they have to solve a puzzle or something, and that will release a trailer, and there's all of this sort of extra kind of world building going on through, what is functionally a transmedia marketing campaign that is all designed to generate buzz and hype for the film. And sometimes the marketing strategies then become part of a traditional news cycle because they're so cool or different, or, there's a bunch of people in a certain area trying to work something out, and, that gets picked up by media outlets. Like it's something that takes an awful lot of planning and time to do. And it's something that can fail spectacularly, we should mention as well. It doesn't always work.
It can go really, really badly, or it could even be more interesting than the product, which is
Yes.
also a failure.
Yes.
Because if it's more interesting than the product, then the product just gets instantly forgotten.
Yeah. And I don't think that happened here. I think that this is a really successful marriage, if you like, of a transmedia mystery box style marketing campaign that goes well with its final product, of this found footage monster movie.
I was explaining this concept to somebody at my work 2 days ago and saying, oh, I'm doing Cloverfield, but what I'm really interested in is marketing. And I was trying to explain, I go, oh, actually, here's a reference you'll get. Who Shot Mr. Burns?
Yeah.
Who Shot Mr. Burns was one of these early things of, hey, at the end of a season, this thing happened. At the start of the season happened. In the middle of that season, there were phone polls, news articles, all these sort of things, this kind of cross-promotional, transmedia kind of thing that was massive at the time. But this is this to 11. Like Cloverfield is that to 11. Like they had stuff after the film. They had video diaries that released after the film on websites. They had all these kind of really cool things. I want to talk about something in this movie, though, if you let me pivot a little bit, that I think gets overlooked based on the type of movie it is and the achievements, and that is the plot and the characters of this. At most, they're pretty meh, which is because of what this movie is trying to achieve. It's not a character study. It's not an epic story. It is simple people, found footage in this environment. Watching this movie, almost what are we, 2024, 2008, so all that time, a lot of these actors have become famous. And one of the mechanics of a found footage film is you shouldn't really recognize the actors because it's found footage. It's supposed to mimic real life. So I actually found it quite odd seeing Lizzie Kaplan and TJ Miller and the Beth, the girl who plays Beth. She's in a lot of TV shows I've seen, like New Girl and all that sort of stuff. And it was this kind of realization moment of, oh, of course this is a mechanic of found footage films, and I've never encountered this before, but it's really weird knowing the people in the movie. It takes a small of the shine off it.
Yeah, look, I guess I wasn't coming to the movie for the first time, so I didn't have that same thing. When I saw it, I didn't know any of those people. I had seen Lizzie Kaplan in Mean Girls, I think it was, but that was really pretty much about it. So it was. I could get on board with that, but I think you're right. It works the best, when you don't know the actors. Now, one thing that I sort of want to talk about is some of the technical stylings of this movie, because it's tricky when you are trying to present something that, look, yes, it's found footage and it's supposed to look amateur, but we also have characters that go up into helicopters. We're traversing from buildings to buildings, at height. We are seeing giant CGI monsters, crash through everything. And so this film was one of those interesting cases where they shot on high-end digital cinema cameras, not camcorders.
Yeah.
And then they treated the footage later to basically make it worse, and actually sort of bring it down so that they had the most versatility. Now, that approach makes an awful lot of sense, but it also is quite interesting that if you look at the opening, say, 20, 25 minutes of the film where we're in the party, we are, having the first monster attack on the street, and basically from kind of the moment where if we sort of run it up to where the Statue of Liberty head lands in the street, they are doing everything they possibly can to make it look like garbage, right? So it's funny, like you look at the way that the camera is treating the internal light sources, and you're like, yeah, that's what a camcorder would do to that light. It would make it look all orange and awful. Like, do you know what I mean?
Yep.
When they get out onto the street for the first time, the look of the street lamps, you know, are really pushing that color palette into the scene, basically tricking the audience into making us think, yes, this is a camcorder, not a high-end cinema camera. The more the film goes on, the less of that look is actually present in the film. They do a bait and switch throughout the movie, and by the time you get to the last 10 minutes, pretty much all of those telltale hooks are gone, you know, and we're actually just watching something that looks pretty high end, you know, but they slowly actually swap one out for the other. And the idea is that the audience never notices. And true enough, that's one of those things where I'm like, again, when I watched it in 2008, I didn't notice. When I watch it now in 2024, I absolutely did. And I'm like, that's so, you sneaky guys, you cleverly have swapped us.
Yeah, I didn't really notice it, but now thinking back on it, I did kind of start to go, oh, I can see more of the picture as the movie goes on. Like the lighting becomes less obstructive, I suppose. Like it's less dark, it's less dank. And yeah, they're going through different environments, but a lot of those environments still would be very kind of like oppressive, and they're not. And you're right, I didn't pick up on it on my first viewing, but it's something that you watch over and over again. You would see those tricks or those film languages come through. This movie, plot-wise, shouldn't have occurred. If basic human instinct kicked in at all for anyone but Rob, they would have lived. As it is, I think only one person lived in this movie of the main group.
It's just Lily who gets in the chopper and she's fine, you know, so.
Because here's the deal, Jim. If a disaster ever occurs and I'm on the other side of the city, I'm never going to ask you to come rescue me. That is not your job. You have family, that sort of stuff. Any future spouse I have, that is not your job. Your job is to survive. Your job is to get out. The amount of times people are running the opposite direction to them, phenomenal. Even the rats, dude. If I see a bunch of rats running, I'm running with the rats. Rats are scary, man.
Look,
especially in numbers, they'll fight things.
Maybe it's the romantic in me. And look, Ben, I have to say, look, yes, if you're suffering on the other side of the city, don't worry, I'm not coming. But like, you know, that's not something that you and I have to be concerned about. But you know, like it's Rob and Beth, Ben. It's Rob and Beth, right?
From what I can tell, they had 12 hours of possible relationship before this, as presented in the film.
Look, here's the thing. It's supposed to be the love of the century, right? Now, whether it is or not,
quietly, Shrek and Fiona is the love of the century. That's a love story.
I would say that, like, honestly, and look, this isn't necessary. It's this whole thing is a trick, right? It's they have to put these things in place that creates tension between Rob and Beth at the start. Well, first of all, you have to create the audience has to buy in to Rob and Beth. Then you have to instantly create tension between Rob and Beth, and then you have to spend the rest of the movie trying to get Rob and Beth back together. It's kind of impossible because the movie gives you about 5 minutes to both A, care about them, and then B, break them up. You know, honestly, neither Rob or Beth come across particularly well in the opening 10 minutes of this movie.
I think I have a solution to this plot point. So in this movie, Rob has a brother who gets bridged to death. He's in the middle of a bridge, a tentacle comes down, cuts that bridge in half, basically on top of him. Like, that, it doesn't miss. But, hear me out. What if at the start of that movie, he's going to Japan, and Beth was his sister who'd just moved to New York, and they had a fight at the party, and she'd left. And the reason that she's in danger now is because she had a fight with Rob, and Rob, as the big brother, has to go and rescue her. Take the love story out of it. It's not needed. Then you have two people who want to go to rescue because you have two brothers instead of one moron who wants to traverse the city and kill all his friends.
Look, you know, honestly, Sure, fine. We could have done that, you know. Audiences like a love story though, Ben. You got to admit
Audiences are dum-dums.
they love a love story. The other tricky thing is that like Rob does spend a lot of time saying, you know, hey, you don't have to follow me. I'm good. I'm
Agreed.
good. Don't have to follow me. And the only one who really doesn't want to follow him is Lizzie Kaplan
And
as Marlena,
and
and she's just like,
Huddy at the start's like, hey man, like we should all go with those guys. And then he just is so weak that he gets dragged along. But yeah. Poor Lizzie Kaplan's Marlena. When they kind of get her, she's not in a frame of mind to make decisions.
No.
And she's just dragged along until she can't go back.
It's also kind of rough because the entire movie, even after the monster attack, she has no romantic interest in Hud whatsoever. Like, you know, and he's just pursuing. And then it sort of gets to the point where, like, spoilers, she dies at the halfway point. And it's like,
She
on
explodes.
the one hand, it's sort of like, oh, she'd started to come around to Hud. And then on the other hand, I'm sort of like, why are you coming around to HUD? Like, you know, what's that about?
Here's the deal. They make it out of that. It's one of those survivor relationships. 6 months, they're done.
Yeah, I don't even think she warmed up to him enough to actually, you know, it maybe they were, you know, acquaintances verging on friends, you know, if she actually lived. But, you know, I don't think that they're...
Story-wise, something I think they did really well in this movie. And it's a strange thing to think about, but it's very noticeable when you look at modern movies that deal with this subject matter. The way they treated the military in this film, they were just as caught off guard, they were just as confused, but they weren't mean, they weren't evil, they were just trying to survive as well and try to get as many people out. And I thought that was executed kind of quite well in the small time frame it was given.
It was, and even that that one, you know, I don't know, soldier trooper
Friendly
who actually
soldier.
he kind of helps them, like,
Yeah.
and he's like, look, I get it, you know, you are in, and look, and by the way, and also, yes, there's a monster, do you know what I mean? Like, and that performance of that actor, I'm like, you're doing a really good job with very limited screen time, and you're communicating a lot with regard to how your character feels about the fact that there's a huge monster attack, while also doing the mechanics of plot by saying, here, go here, do this, you know, move to that location.
It didn't feel like a yes and inside the universe. It felt like a genuine character going, hey man, if you're going to do this, that's fine. But this whole city is getting buried. We're going to blow it up. You've got till 6 a.m. to get to the point. We get our timer, we get our motivation. And from that point onwards, I'm actually a bit more comfortable with the rescue mission because there's no other option in the movie at this point.
Yeah.
So let's play a little game. I might have spoiled it slightly, but in the all-time list, where do you think Cloverfield ranks in successful found footage films?
See,
it's somewhere in the top 10.
Is it? Okay. Well, see, the trick for me there is, so are you asking me where I think it ranks?
In success, not in like success is money made, right?
It's got it. I'm just saying, I feel like this is going to a place where you're going to say Blair Witch Project just decimates all because of budget to profit ratio. Like, you know, and that's
it really
because
does.
Cloverfield, like it is, look, $30 million and they spent it on monster effects. You know what I mean? Fleeting and, you know, clever, but they still spent that money. Whereas, you know, something like Blair Witch is just pure profit, right? Like, did I spoil it? No,
it's not a spoil. So Blair Witch is number one by far. And it's that cost to thing ratio. Also, there was a hysteria and a fervor for Blair Witch that I think hasn't really been matched since for this sort of movie, right? Because there were genuinely people I knew and probably still know that thought, oh no, this is based on something real. Like the way that campaign was activated. So it's not first. I'll give you a spoiler. It's not second, third, or fourth.
Are you saying Cloverfield's not first?
It's not
or
first.
Second?
It's not in the top 4.
Look, why don't you just tell me
it's fifth.
what the numbers are?
So it comes in fifth. So it goes Blair Witch, 3 Paranormal Activities, and then Cloverfield. I think Cloverfield is a better movie than at a minimum, all the Paranormal Activities. But the Blair Witch and the Paranormal Activities serve a purpose in cinema of kind of that just natural jump scare fest of a film that gets kind of teenagers all the way up to middle-aged adults to go. And they just such a weirdly popular genre of film, the horror found footage. But I think Cloverfield is a far superior film. Blair Witch is maybe a better product, just on
Well,
its
it's tricky
execution.
because the thing with Blair Witch Project, is look, I don't want to say it was the first, but it was kind of the first. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like people had been playing with this, concept of sort of found footage, but Blair Witch, this was like you said, some people thought it was real because the conceit of a found footage movie was just not around. It wasn't in the public's consciousness. So therefore, when it hit big, not just because of its story or its subject matter, but because of its presentation, So, but look, we haven't talked at all about the monster, right, of this movie.
Yeah.
Like, I actually think this monster, which they affectionately dub Clover, never named in the movie, right? But the monster's name is officially Clover. Is terrifying and scary and disturbing and ugly, and do you know what I mean? Like, and it's a real movie monster, and just a creepy looking thing,
They're really playing on cosmic horror with this, like
Mm.
the familiar that doesn't look familiar. Like there's parts of this movie where you can see it's almost humanoid in shape, but then it has a tail, and then it has extra pieces, and then it has other parasites that fall off of it and can act independently. I was actually mind blown by how much they actually showed of the monster. Because in my head, it was like, hey, they don't really show the monster; they show pieces of monster. But towards the end, they fully show the monster. And look, it doesn't fully hold up based on current graphics and animations and all that sort of stuff and digital effects, but it's real close. Like it's real close, and the design is something that is not really been done since. Like for those of you who like kaiju movies, like Godzilla and even King Kong to a lesser extent, they're all familiar. You look at them and you go, that's a dinosaur, that's a gorilla or a monkey, that's a blah blah. You look at this and it is beyond your full comprehension. As I said, you look at it and you go, oh, it looks like oh wait, no, it's not. Is it? Oh no, what is it? Oh, that's really creepy. And yeah, so as I said, the cosmic horror really comes through. Like it looks like something that doesn't belong.
I also think that the decision to, because we have this giant, however many story tall monster, but the decision to play out the entire middle of the movie with these parasites that kind of like come off it, and they're sort of, dog sized and disgusting and terrifying. And honestly, the sequences in the tunnels are, borderline pretty disturbing.
Yeah.
And again, pushing their conceit to the limit where they're sort of like, oh, I think there's a light on the camera, and I think the camera has night vision. That whole sequence is fantastic because it's just terrifying. Like, and that's something where, you're in a cinema and you see that sort of that you're in that pitch black, subway tunnel, and suddenly the light snaps on or the night vision snaps on and people are getting taken out by these parasites. And I'm like, it brings a whole different flavor to the midsection of the movie, to really provide variety and also up the tension, and I think it does it really well.
It also gives what is inherently difficult to do in a found footage film, gives the movie acts, right?
Mm.
Like found footage quite often suffers with structure. This has structure within its conceit, which is really cool. I how do I put this without? I think it may be my favorite movie we've watched for this podcast. I don't think it's the best movie, but I think it's my favorite
Interesting. So
because it allowed me to explore so much more even outside of the movie. It was something I hadn't seen, but yeah, I think it's my favorite movie we've watched so far.
So would you say you will be watching Cloverfield again?
I'm not a massive rewatcher unless it's a feel-good movie. So I call it's an interesting concept for me. I call them rainy day movies. A movie I will put on when I've got nothing else to do. It's rainy outside and I want to kind of cozy up. They're the movies I rewatch. They're not the best movies that I think are like ranking wise, but they're the movies that I find rewatchable. I don't think this for me. It's maybe a once every 12 months rewatch at most, and probably not even that. But again, like I'm complex. You never know. I might watch it tomorrow.
No, I really like Cloverfield. I guess the only other thing to talk about is maybe its kind of legacy, because Cloverfield is something where soon after Cloverfield, and I'll probably get the year wrong because I haven't looked it up, but I want to say around, I don't know, 2012, something like that, J.J. Abrams did a film called Super 8. And Super 8 is a fantastic film. Basically, if you want to draw a line and end up at Stranger Things, you're going to start at E.T., you're going to pass through Super 8, and you're going to end up at Stranger Things, right? And look, when Super 8 hit, I think Ben, you're looking up the exact year for me now.
I am.
But I remember when Super 8 came out because, look, Matt Reeves, and we haven't talked enough about Matt Reeves, but Matt Reeves did a fantastic job of directing Cloverfield, but we have talked about J.J. Abrams. 2011. That was 1 year off. That's not too bad.
Real close.
But look, we have talked about J.J. Abrams. Now, J.J. Abrams actually directed the film Super 8. Now, Super 8 has a, monster as well, which is more sort of human-sized, a little bit oversized perhaps, but not, stories and stories tall. And the design of that monster is so close to Clover from Cloverfield, and knowing Abrams' history of the mystery box and the linking things together. Look, honestly, there's a part of me that even to this day is not convinced that there isn't a connection between Super 8 and Cloverfield, but they tell me that there isn't, right? J.J. Abrams has said, hey, they were designed by the same guy. He was great on Cloverfield, and then we kept him on, and he designed the monster for Super 8. And I'm like, that's a really boring version of like how these
Make
two
it better,
movies...
JJ.
Yeah, I'm like, how these two movies might have actually worked together. But so in my head, Super 8 is some kind of spiritual sequel, sidequel, prequel, to Cloverfield, but it's apparently not canon, even though it had a lot of the same creatives involved. But they did something interesting.
The elephant in the room.
Sorry?
That brings us kind of to the elephant in the room with this movie and this universe, in that there were two in-universe films set same time, after, before, depends on how you kind of read it. So the first is 10 Cloverfield Lane, and the second one is the Cloverfield Paradox. Both of these movies were written, conceived, and developed without the idea that they were part of the Cloverfield universe. And then as a marketing thing, they kind of shoehorned the Cloverfield stuff in where they could. 10 Cloverfield Lane, it's literally in the last 30 seconds of the movie. Even if that, like, it's a bit different. And Cloverfield Paradox is one I haven't seen, so I'll rely on you a bit more. But that one is more of a, like, as far as I understand it, an explanation film. Like, this kind of explains how Cloverfield may have happened.
Yeah, it's tricky. I mean, look, I've seen both. I really like 10 Cloverfield Lane, and I think it works pretty great as a sort of, side quell or, possible in-universe connection to Cloverfield. The Cloverfield Paradox doesn't hold together as well, both as a movie and also as a part of the Cloverfield universe. But yes, it does actually go a bit of a ways to sort of explaining some of the mechanics of how this might have happened. But it's the kind of thing where it's sort of like, it's tricky when you're sort of retconning existing scripts and movies into, a universe where they don't exist. But again, very on brand, if you like, for both J.J. Abrams' Bad Robot, his production company, and the Cloverfield universe. So I would say that they are apparently developing a true sequel to Cloverfield, which, I'm very much looking forward to. I mean, a part of me is sort of like, and look, they're probably never going to do this because it'd be way too expensive. But can you imagine if it was like a 360 camera mounted to like some guy's shoulder or something, and you could watch it with like an Apple VR Vision Pro headset and look anywhere? Like, I'm like, they'll never do that. But seriously, how cool would that be?
That'd be very cool. I do want to bring up an internet fan theory that I actually really like and fits the current structure of the Cloverfield universe. The Quiet Place is also set in the Cloverfield universe.
Are you aware of this?
Well, no, I just read it as an internet theory.
Okay, so literally, A Quiet Place was actually, when they were sort of doing the kind of pre-production work for A Quiet Place, they approached Bad Robot and said, maybe it's a Cloverfield movie, right?
And they said
like,
no.
This happened. This conversation happened with John Krasinski, and ultimately they said, no, you do your own thing, but that's really cool because we're doing other stuff at the moment, like the real Cloverfield 2. However, you've got a really strong concept, just go for it. Do you know what I mean? Like, so that idea, it's like, it's not just a behind the scenes movie fan theory. It's something where it's like, no, this was kicked around, explored by the creatives. So,
well, Jim, thank you for watching this movie with me. I feel like we've gone on a really nice run of friendly movie picks. And I can't wait to see the next friendly movie pick given to me by yourself.
Well, look, I don't know how you're going to feel about this because, like, it's a bit of a weird pick in some ways, but and look, these podcasts that we do, they're not really locked in time. The idea is that, people could be viewing or listening to this at any point. But I will say, in the real world, right, that we live in, May is right around the corner. And May the 4th is sort of known as kind of Star Wars Day. So I decided the whole, based off the silly joke,
Come
May
on,
the 4th
Star
be
Wars
with you.
holiday special.
Based off the really just silly joke of May the 4th be with you. But I thought, why not honor that, and have a look at, a podcast of ours that should hit somewhere around the month of May. And we're going to have a look at 1983's Return of the Jedi. So, which again, it's tricky now. There's a lot of
place to start watching Star Wars movies.
It is. But of course, for you and I, this is not the start of us watching Star Wars movies.
I've seen more Star Wars than probably any other movie combined.
So then it sort of became, okay, well, which one, might be the most fitting for us to talk about? And for a few reasons, I landed on Return of the Jedi. So, look, if you've never seen a Star Wars movie before and you're doing this this journey with us as you sort of watch something each week, you've got a bit more homework to do than just watching Return of the Jedi, unless you want to get super confused. But look, considering that 90% of people on the planet, yes, that's an exaggeration, have seen this series already, it's probably a pretty safe bet. So,
all right, are we going archaeological here and finding the original version, or are we just going with the version we have?
Look, you and I are so familiar with these films that I don't care what version you watch. We're probably going to talk about all of them. Yeah. So,
all right, I'm excited. It's actually been a while since I've watched it. So
me too, and I can tell you, just for whatever, I'll be watching the version that is currently up on Disney Plus. And I say that because I don't know what crazy tweaks Lucasfilm have made recently, and the streaming versions can get, updated and changed all the time. So who knows what we're about to see.
I'll be watching my Blu-ray. So, thank you so much for joining us on our podcasting adventures. You can find us on YouTube at Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. You can find us on Spotify, Apple, Jim and Ben's Movie Adventures. And you can find us on Instagram, Jim_and_Ben, where I post movie posters and little things. Like I posted recently Best Grandpas in Cinema, and had like Peter Falk, and I had Mr. like had the guy from Three Ninjas, and I had Jurassic Park, and I had all those sort of ones. So yeah, check out our Instagram, check out our stuff. Thank you for visiting our podcast. Thanks for visiting our podcast. Thanks for listening or watching our podcasts, and see you next time.
Bye-bye.
Peace.